abortion is not a good thing.
Why do you think abortion is not a good thing?
Life is precious. Life is a gift actually from God. And so to take away that gift is to completely spit in God's face and say the gift that I've given you is worthless.
You don't think that taking away the woman's rights of her body and her autonomy is going against the morals of God?
Do I think it's going against the morals of God? Absolutely. If she chooses to abort the child, or is at the point of decision to abort a child and says, I don't like society and I don't want to bring this child up, then why did you fall pregnant in the first place?
You're married, contraception failed, condom broke, other stuff didn't
Have
work.
the child, adopt it out. Abortion should be illegal, except for in extreme circumstances of rape, molestation,
So
or
okay,
incest.
so for rape, you agree with rape situations, abortion should be fine.
No, I don't. I think you should find the rapist and kill him, not the baby.
You're saying there's the gift from God. So a woman that has gone through sexual abuse, that's a gift from God.
Not the sexual abuse, but God can turn something as ugly as sexual abuse into something beautiful as a child. These short-term decisions, thinking it's going to be over as soon as on Thursday I get my abortion, it's all over. No, it's not. Your nightmare's about to begin on Thursday. It's a whole new problem.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Hamad Chowdhury's Debates. Today, two males will be debating whether abortion is right or abortion is wrong. Now, Phil over here is a priest. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Phil Lewis. I'm a pastor at One Christian Church in Fremantle, and I'll be taking the position that abortion is not a good thing.
So let's go straight into it. Why do you think abortion is not a good thing?
Well, it depends if we're talking about morality or legality. So for me, I don't go into the sphere of legality. I take a position from a moral perspective, the morals and the ethics of abortion. So being a Christian, being a minister, we hold that the biblical view is that life is precious. Life is a gift actually from God. And so to take away that gift is to completely spit in God's face and say the gift that I've given you is worthless. And so I know there are a lot of arguments around the rights of a woman to have autonomy over their own body, but that completely negates the fact that that child inside you has rights as well. So if then you start moving into the legal realm. So for me, the moral argument stands that life is sacred. And nobody has, and any decent society would say that it's wrong to take the life of another human being. But when we come into the issue of abortion, we move into this realm of somehow it's mysterious that we need to have or placate a group of people that want to have rules and laws outside of what a good society deems a good moral understanding. Like if you were to survey any room, you'd say, is it okay to kill other people? We'd say, no. There'd be very few people who can argue, yeah, it's okay to kill. Would you say it's okay to kill people?
Certain circumstances, I did believe it's okay to kill people.
And what circumstances?
Like, for example, would you think it was okay to kill Hitler?
Knowing who he was or post-knowing who he was?
Knowing who he is or post-knowing who he is.
Okay to kill him. It would be outside of the issue of morality.
So this man's decimated millions of people, innocent people. So in situations like that, yeah, I think killing is fine. There's certain types of humans that come onto the planet that aren't mentally, spiritually fit to be able to assimilate with society. So in situations like that, what do? Just lock them up and further cause them suffering? I mean, if you look at it from a religious perspective, death, do you believe death exists, really?
Absolutely, I'm going to do it one day.
Yeah, but do you think that you live on again after that? So realistically, if that person is not ready to incarnate on this planet and they're a danger to society, maybe it's better to keep them away from the rest of society before they cause damage and harm.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, when God has given us, for example, this right to live, you don't think that taking away the woman's rights of her body and her autonomy is going against the morals of God?
Do I think it's going against the morals of God? Absolutely, because this woman that says she has the right over her own body is now not only exercising right over her own body to exist in whatever autonomous form she chooses to do so, she's now taken the rights of that child and making a decision of life and death over that child.
But that child doesn't understand the current state of affairs of the reality that it's coming into, and the mother understands that better. And her womanly, powerful intuition can say, hey, it's a dangerous place for you to come up. I don't have the money, I don't have the finances, I don't have the resources. So rather than you coming into a traumatic world, I'm going to choose to send you back to the rightful owner.
Okay. But then you're moving into issues of, say, jurisprudence and moral ethics around, or ethical ethics around a society. So you've got to ask the question, if if she chooses to abort the child, or is at the point of decision to abort a child and says, I don't like society and I don't want to bring this child up, then why did you fall pregnant in the first place? If she says, I can't afford it, what, last week you couldn't afford it, you could afford it last week and now you can't. So, those sort of arguments are actually quite quickly encapsulated in a lot of surveys. So it's a horrible admission. So 92.5% of abortions were conducted on the premise of convenience. Couldn't afford it, didn't want it, circumstances changed, etc., etc. So we've got this position in our culture that has moved away from the value of life, which it keeps circling, the argument keeps circling around the value of human life, and this woman has the right to choose. The child has no right to choose. Who advocates for the child who has no right to defend themselves?
But you're comparing a fully grown human to something that's not essentially even in the reality that the woman's in. So for example, if the woman was to bring this child into the world, imagine the pressure, the stress, the depression that she goes through, having a child that she doesn't want to deal with. So you've technically taken away her autonomy to exist now, because now she's suffering with this liability that she shouldn't have to in the first place. She could have made that decision as a powerful person, say, hey, it's my body, it's my choice. I can choose to bring this person into the world or not.
She had the same autonomy before when she decided to have sex.
Yeah.
So she's... Have you ever noticed that our society...
But what if it was like, for example, there's obviously cases where condoms break, there's obviously sexual assault cases. What's your perspective on that? Like even in those cases, they shouldn't have the child?
But are you talking about the legality or the morality
I'm talking about the morality.
The morality of it. Here's why we have these discussions is, and I'm going to speak, because I'm not duplicit. I have a split... I'm not a split personality, but I have a split position, which is, one, I'm a minister that holds to a biblical view. The other is, I think I'm a rational thinking human being. So I sort of vacillate, and it'd be naive to say that as a rational thinking human being, that my belief system doesn't affect me. That would be completely naive. But I'm going to just step back from the rational man and just look at a biblical perspective, right? I think the reason we're even able to have, or being forced to have these conversations, is because we've moved away from the acknowledgement of God. So the whole problem with society isn't that we've got bad laws and bad people and all the rest. The fact is we refuse to let God tell us how to live. And if we did follow a biblical model, abortion would barely be a topic. Now, that's the problem, is because we've moved away from the concept of absolute right and absolute wrong. So when someone says this is right and this is wrong, and someone else completely opposes them, we've got this permanent tension in society, not because one's right or one's wrong, but because we've removed ourselves from the authority of someone higher than us to say, this is right and wrong, just do it. If you go to Adam and Eve in the garden, whether you think that's a metaphor or it's literal, the premise is really simple. God has given them abundance in this garden.
Right.
Absolutely everything except for one tree, the knowledge of good and evil. So the reason we don't know what the fruit is because if we thought it was an apple, we'd have the Church of the Sacred Apple and all that sort of nonsense. So we tend to deify the wrong things. The point being, they had to have an object which they could desire that they weren't allowed to have. Otherwise, free will is a moot point. You have to have the option to choose. So we've got Adam and Eve in the garden, and they have got this choice to continue living abundantly with everything or take this one thing they're not allowed to have. So they choose. And what that tree represents, the knowledge of good and evil, is not about knowing good and evil. In the Hebrew, it's quite clear. It's to discern for themselves good and evil. So the problem that we're facing today is a flow-on effect from that initial event, which is the choice that I will reject what God says is right and wrong, and I will do what's right and wrong. So when God says, don't have sex outside of marriage, in this modern era we go, oh, how crazy is that, how geeky is that? Maybe so. But if you followed that rationale, you'd have two young people that grow up, never have intercourse with anybody else, they get together, and their relationship has got no comparisons. Yet, like, these days...
Well, what about situations where someone's gone through sexual assault? Or maybe they are married, but the contraception methods haven't worked properly, and they're not in the financial place. They're not in the emotional space to be able to bring a child into the world. Do you think it's right moralistically to be able to abort that child.
No, again, because you're putting convenience above the life of a child. But that
that convenience is helping your life and your partner's life. Whereas you both might now drown trying to bring this other kid up, where emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, you're not even ready to give the responsibility of raising another child. That means 3 people are going down in the ship.
Okay, so the logic is, from my perspective, if you're not financially or physically able or mentally able, then you shouldn't be having sex.
It was an accident.
An accident?
Yeah, because the contraception
Some
failed.
guy fell on top of you. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
You're still having
contraception
sex.
failed.
So the contraception
No, but you're
failed.
married.
Okay.
You're married, contraception failed. Condom broke, other stuff didn't
Have
work.
the child, adopt it out.
Adopt it out. Have the child adopted out.
Yeah.
So 9 months, the woman has to carry this child, and she doesn't have the autonomy on her body to say, no.
Are we talking legally or morally?
I'm talking both. Because legally they can. Legally they can abort the child up to 12 weeks, I believe. 12, yes, 12 weeks, 3 months. After that, it is illegal. But in that state, they should have the choice. They should be able to be like, hey, look, this is my body, and I can predict the future of what's going to happen if I have this child. And as a rational, grown adult who can make logical choices, I think that woman should have that right.
You think she should have that right?
I think she should have that right.
51% of women don't think they should have that right. 51% of women surveyed said abortion should be illegal, except for in extreme circumstances of rape, molestation,
So
or incest.
so for rape, you agree with rape situations, abortion should be fine.
No, I don't. I think you should find the rapist and kill him, not the baby.
But the thing is, you don't even know the genetic history of the person who's done the raping. How do you know that this person doesn't grow up to be a criminal? How do you know that they don't have the proclivities of being an absolute killer, mentally not fit, and you're going to bring someone else's child into the world? Mm-hmm. How does that give the woman the power when her power has been taken, and now she has to give birth to a child that's not even hers?
Yeah, I think
How does that work?
if you look into it, you will find that most serial killers have grown up in very normal homes. It's not a genetic thing to go out and want to kill people. It's an environmental thing where you're exposed to things, it excites something wrong in your head and you pursue those things. So I think the fact you might be raped by an absolute beast of a human being doesn't mean that child is going to be a beast. You can raise them in a loving environment and they can be completely functional human beings, adding to society. I don't see really any case. Look, if there was going to be... we understand the Christian God to be a good God, a God of principle.
So God would punish you if you were to get rid of that kid?
I think the guilt that the woman experiences for having an abortion, because as a minister, I can assure you, I've had to
I agree
spend
with you
time
that.
with women.
Regardless
The
of any abortion,
emotional torment of emotion, and this is sadly what's not being taught, not being educated to the young women, or even the women who are potentially going to have an abortion, is the psychological damage to them. So while you've got this extreme bunch of women saying women have got rights for autonomy, well, if you're going to go there, then tell the whole story. Explain to them that they're going to be in years and years of counselling. 30 years later, they're still going to regret that what they've done to this child. There's a group in America called Feminists for Life, and they have got over 2.5 million, they've only started a few years ago, 2.5 million posts about women who regret. You won't hear that in the mainstream because that goes against the narrative. The narrative is every woman has the understanding that there is something growing in them. And, I've looked at all the arguments from your side, which is, there's what about viability and what about consciousness? And they're all relative terms. The fact is the woman knows that what's inside them is both human, because the DNA of the male and the DNA of the female have come together to create something absolutely unique. It is human in every way, no matter from the point of being just a simple zygote to the attachment of the womb to the full, but the whole process is human.
So
it's alive, otherwise it wouldn't be growing.
At what point is it a human? At what point is it a human?
From the moment that the egg and the sperm come together, you have, the term is zygote, which means you now have a DNA of a human organism.
So prior to that, it's not.
No.
I
think if you want to get right down to semantics, if the termination happened within 24 hours, because they claim in the medical world that's the period it takes between true inception, the fullness of inception, then you have a living organism. If it was going to be morally, not necessarily legal, morally okay, that would be the period there. That would be the period.
And you're comfortable
because you
with
don't
that?
have I'm comfortable with it. I think you have to draw a line somewhere because we're in a fallen world. People are not going to go back to a biblical worldview where they say it's absolutely wrong for people to have sex outside of marriage. It's
So you're saying
not going to happen.
for a woman to have the choice of getting rid of a child inside her body, that is a fallen world. That she shouldn't have that choice.
Yeah, well, it's not that she shouldn't have it. She should never be placed in that position.
But that's pretty much the same thing. That she shouldn't have that choice.
Yeah. Well, it shouldn't.
We're just dealing with the semantics again.
Well, yeah, semantics.
And is that really a place for a man to say that? Like, is that a place for a man to be able to dictate and make that decision for women?
Is it just men saying that?
Well, it's, I mean, me and you, men, are having this conversation right now. We don't know how it is to be a woman. We don't know how it is to harbor a child 9 months in our body, even 3 months in our body. So, like, how can we really, or even yourself, really say that, you shouldn't be able to get an abortion? Whereas for me, like, I'm more or less on the team of the women.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's not a position that I take because I'm a man. It's a position I take because I care about human life. Look, I understand.
Well, doesn't God care about human life then for women?
Absolutely.
Because the pain that they're going to go through bringing this unwanted child into the world. Once the child's out, you're stuck with a lifelong responsibility, at least up to age 18.
Yes, but you hit the key word there, responsibility. We've got a world that focuses so heavily on our rights. It's all about our rights, but we don't talk about our responsibilities. If you want to have the right to go and have sex, you better be prepared to take the responsibilities of having sex.
You're right.
If you're married or you're single or you're just out doing the dating thing, if you're going to engage in that activity, you can't claim to be naive to what the outcome might be.
No, you're right.
So responsibility is what it's about.
There's qualities of responsibility though, right? Like, for example, someone just drops a bush pig into my house and now I have to raise this bush pig. Right? Like, imagine that. Like, this bush pig's eating in my kitchen, it's running around, it's knocking the kids over. Like, that's not a good responsibility to have, is it? Whereas, for example, someone drops a kitten into my house. That's a nice responsibility to have. It plays with the kids, it's respectful. You don't really need to even worry about it. It cleans itself. In that sense, when a woman goes through sexual abuse, or it is in a form of accidental inception, that responsibility to me seems as it's a drastic responsibility that's not in the woman's power, it's not in her control, and I just don't think, or I'm not convinced yet that women shouldn't have the choice, and they shouldn't live with the guilt that if they, for example, terminate the child, they're going to go through enough already. Do they need that guilt from God or the Creator saying that you've done something wrong?
It's not a direct guilt from God because I've done something wrong.
Is God angry?
God angry?
Is God angry when a child gets terminated?
Is God angry? I think anger is probably the wrong word. I think there'd be a disappointment. If we consider God to have, the capacities
of human emotions.
Right. So we tend to reduce our understanding of God down to our emotional status.
Does God even really care then? If God doesn't have human emotions, does God really care? Or is God all about learning? Okay, you've made a decision, now you're going to suffer the consequences. Whether it's depression, whether you're sad, whether it's guilt, you got to reap that. That's the learning of it. Could it just be like that? Or maybe God doesn't care?
Well, God definitely cares. I mean, John 3:16 says God so loved the world that he gave his only son. So there is this clear understanding from Scripture, from the Bible, that God has emotional capacity. So when the Bible says we're made in his image, which is the main reason we hold to the view that life is sacred, is you can kill a pig, you can kill a duck, you can kill a whatever and eat it, but you don't kill humans because they're made in the image of God. There is something different about human life as opposed to all other life forms on this planet. It's sacred because in it we reflect God's character, God's nature, his personality, his desire for connection. You don't see that in animal worlds. You've got pure instinct, nothing more than that. But we are so much more than just four-legged animals running around the planet. We're now two-legged animals. If you believe in evolution, we're two-legged animals running around. We're just highly evolved. And the status of our worth is not because we're more evolved or because we've got a higher intellect. It's because we're in the image of God. That's what makes us unique on this planet. So to take away a human life, whether a zygote or a full-grown human being, is to take away a gift of God. Remove something from the planet that was by his design meant to reflect him. Now, humanity fails terribly at reflecting him, I agree.
So you're saying there's the gift from God.
Yeah.
So a woman that has gone through sexual abuse, that's a gift from God.
Not the sexual abuse, but God can turn something as ugly as sexual abuse into something beautiful as a child.
Okay.
I'm a father. I've got a 34-year-old son. I've got 3 teenage girls still at home. I've been there for the birth of all of them.
It's magical.
Mate, there is
It's
nothing
magical,
like
look.
it on the planet. So when I say, we ask the question, why do men, do we have the right to speak into this? Well, I've got to tell you, it takes 2 to have a baby. So while the woman might carry that for 9 months,
Right.
let me tell you, for the next 50 years of your life, you're carrying it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
'Cause you're carrying the burdens and the responsibilities of your partner.
That's it.
And the kids.
That's it. So when someone says, oh, we can't afford it, mate, let me tell you, nobody can ever afford a kid. You cannot afford it. There is restrictions on your life. You can't go as many holidays as you can't get that fast car you wanted. You can't get the bigger house. It's expensive, man. I can't tell you how much I've spent in tuition fees and school fees. Would my life be better? Okay,
Yeah.
would my life be better without my kids? Well, that depends on what criteria you use for better. My life is so filthy rich because I've got the most beautiful kids in the world. Would I have more money? If your criteria is money and selfishness and doing what you want, then you're richer here. I'd happily do it all over again and forsake all riches for my kids. They're the most wonderful joy in my life. The problem that for people that get an abortion without really understanding is they're missing out on the greatest treasure of life, which is to give
I completely
life.
Phil, like with me, I'm a father also, and I completely agree with you. Kids are the most sacred forms of gifts that I have ever come across in my life. The amount of teaching that my daughter teaches me, I would never take that away from anyone else. But look, not everyone has that same perspective as me and you do. Not everyone can have that spiritual connection with kids. People who, for example, mothers who are addicted to drugs, they've got depression, they've gone through sexual assault. For a person like that to bring a child up into the world, they're not going to have that sacred experience with that. They could. There is a potentiality there, they could. But for the cost of the rest of society, are we going to risk it? Are we going to risk bringing up another monster into the world that isn't unwanted, that the mother can't even love and connect with? In that situation, you don't think that God would want to take that gift away and give the world the gift of not having that child come onto the planet?
Then you cycle back to the question, why would God allow Hitler? Like, if his mum had have known what he was going to become, why not abort him? Should his mum have aborted him?
So do you think God knew he was going to be an absolute monster, just ravaging Jewish people?
Absolutely. God knew. We understand from the Bible that God is outside of time, space, matter, for God created all of these things. In the beginning, God created. So time, space, and matter is his constructs that he created for our use, for our benefit, for our understanding. He doesn't need time, space, matter. So when it says that God foreknew, it's not that God makes something happen. He already knows ahead of time. He knows how this conversation ends. He knows what Jack's going to do. He knows everything that's going to happen. Doesn't mean he has to interfere with what's going to happen. Perhaps what he does is he uses individuals like you and me to have conversations about things that are undesirable, and he wants us to think about the issues. Perhaps the greatest reflection of him is when we use our intellect and our moral capacities to do what's right instead of do what's wrong.
Then why does he have to interfere when it comes to a woman taking an abortion?
Is he interfering?
Well, he said it's not right. Isn't that a form of interference?
Isn't he simply upholding a principle?
If we're on a game playing soccer, there's a coach, right? The coach isn't allowed to play the game, but if the coach tells you, hey, you can't kick that ball, isn't that a form of interfering?
No, because it takes the player to obey with the interferer, with the coach. You can obey or disobey. An instruction is given. That's not interference until you choose whether you're going to obey it or disobey it.
But the code is there, the order is there, in a sense, from the highest form of existence of life itself. Yeah. So it would almost be wrong if you weren't to listen to the command.
Correct.
Right. But isn't that interference then?
Interference requires me to override your will. I give you an objective and you say yes or no. That's not interference.
But what about if you're creating the emotional pressure around the decision making of that situation? So if you're saying this is wrong, this is bad, you can't do this, society is going to judge you, this, that's interfering on the emotional decision making capacity of the individual, isn't it?
Interfering or impacting? Because interfering...
You're influencing it.
Absolutely influencing.
Definitely. You have a control over it, which means that you can dictate and direct it in a certain way, which to me seems as interference. If there was no interference, it'd be like, do what you do whatever you want to do, whatever you think's right, is right.
But that's humanism. That's ultimately humanism, where you and I get to choose what's right and wrong.
Yeah.
And we can see where that's taken us. The world's an absolute mess. The world is an absolute
Some great things in the world
mess.
too.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
it's
look,
not void of beauty, but it's a mess. It's an absolute mess.
I guess we just got to choose where to look. But look, I agree with you on a few points. I do. Kids are sacred.
Yeah.
They're one of the most special things to have. Women do go through a lot of guilt when they do abortions, and they go through a lot of pain and suffering, and we need to be there as men to support them. But at the end of the day, you haven't convinced me just of yet of, even if it's a rape case, like, how can it be that you bring that child up?
Okay, so morality or legality? Morality, is it
Legally
it moral that we let a rapist live and we kill an innocent child?
Okay, what if you go and kill the rapist first? Now you got one problem off the table.
Okay.
Right. Now you be a thinking, logical,
Yes.
clear, coherent man, and you look at the situation for what it is. Your missus, or not my missus, someone else's missus has gone through something like this, and you're about to make the decision.
Do you view that life as valuable? Does it have any value in it itself?
Of course it does. I mean, look, that chair over there doesn't really have much value to me, but for a pawn shop, it has a lot of value.
Yeah.
So value is subjective. In that present moment, maybe for the woman, the value of that child is not as present as it should be, because it is a burden. It's going to be a man she doesn't even know of gave her that child. Like, you don't even know this guy, and he forcefully entered you and gave you this child. Like that, and then you got to bring his child up.
Yep.
I don't even know. I'm trying to speak for women.
Yeah. No, again, it's a hideous scenario. No woman should be in that position. I don't think abortion, as devastating as the thought is, I wasn't ready for this. Like, I've got teenage girls. If one of my girls was raped, like I got a 19, an 18, and a 16. If one of them was raped and fell pregnant, I'd be definitely after the head of the guy that did it.
I'm with you, man. I'll got my gun ready to go. Let's go.
So don't you think this is ironic that we spend so much time, effort, money keeping criminals alive but killing innocents? There can't be a more innocent human being on the planet than a child unborn who's never had a greedy, lustful, angry thought in their life. Yet we keep human excrement alive in our prisons, costing us an absolute fortune.
No, I completely agree. But at the same time, you said that, look, you'd go for the head of the killer.
Yep.
The
rapist.
The rapist.
But
isn't that taking a human life? Isn't that against what God's will is then?
Well, there's a difference between vengeance and justice, don't you think?
Well, are you the person to make the justice,
I wouldn't. I mean, when I say that, I'm not a vigilante. I'd be hunting down going for the most extreme penalty I possibly could to get this guy off the streets.
Okay,
so
that's a really Caucasian way of taking someone off the streets. You know, I'm going to grab you. I'm going to deliver you to the police.
That's it. In cable ties, as long as I don't, impede on your human rights.
Right.
So, but for me, if to personalise it, for me, I'd be absolutely telling my kids no. If you have that child, I'll raise it, but you don't take its life.
And if your kid said, "No, I'm not going to have the child," what would your reaction be?
Well, unfortunately, has free will and the laws allow her to do it, but that would be devastating. So I'd try and walk her through post-abortion and try and help her heal the damage that she's done to herself. So while the guy did the initial damage, if we think abortion fixes or undoes that damage, it's completely naive. It creates more damage for the woman.
It does, yeah, right.
And if the media was mainstream, conversation was more honest about it, you'd have far less abortions purely because women would be made aware of the psychological, emotional and physical damage that happens to them post-abortion. There isn't a simple answer because we live in a very complex, confused world.
If your child was to have, if your daughter was to, you're right with me using this as an example. Yeah. If she was to go under that extreme circumstance of being raped, and she was to have this child, and she said, "No, I don't want this child, Dad. Like, I don't want to have this child." Would you tell her that this is the wrong decision that she's making?
Definitely. I mean, as a parent, whether you're a Christian or not, if part of our roles as a parent is to teach our kids right and wrong. So whether you agree with a Christian perspective or not, it's not only my obligation, it's my responsibility to tell her this is a wrong decision. Educate her on what it's going to cost her in the end.
Don't you think that would be more of a burden on her, like where she's going through something and
In the moment,
you
yes.
as a support network is telling her that this is the wrong thing to do, despite what she's just gone through,
Yeah.
which is legally wrong of what she just experienced too. Also, in morally, every way of shape or form is wrong. You don't.
It's a huge burden. It's a huge burden. But again, I have the responsibility to tell her of what it's going to cost her in the end. Because the problem we have is we refuse to acknowledge the long-term costs of these things.
Right.
It's the immediate, get this thing out of my body, I don't want it. We don't realise and we don't educate. Most people don't understand the hugely, deeply painful process that they're going to go through afterwards. You know, even in Australia here, we have abortions that are for free up to the 12 weeks. But part of the funding is for counselling post. Why do they offer free counselling? Because they know how horribly devastating it is for a woman to lose a child. Wanted or unwanted, there is an incredible amount of emotional attachment, physical attachment to a child.
Something inside of you.
Man, I tell you, I've got to tell you, Ahmed, when my kids were pregnant, when my wife was pregnant with every one of our kids, I tell you, I was almost jealous. It sounds like weird and I'm not gender confused, but I was jealous of the experience of having something.
Yeah.
I mean, every single day I'd get home just to feel that little bump move. And
I mean, if you want something brewing inside, you have some Chinese food. Yeah, you get something real quick brewing inside. Yeah,
but I'd be worried about it's coming out, mate. Ain't going to bring anybody joy.
So, what's your solution to this then? So for women out there who are watching this, who've gone through these experiences, they need words of wisdom from someone like yourself who speaks the word of God or is a conduit of God.
Yeah.
What would you tell them? Like what to do? Like,
well, without moving into the legal sphere of trying to change
put the
laws,
legal aside. We're going to look spiritually.
I think the advice I'd give anybody is get better informed. Get a whole picture of what it's going to cost you to have an abortion. Open your eyes to the possibility.
So you mean emotionally, spiritually, financially, mentally?
I mean,
okay.
The mental component is major for some of these people.
Yeah.
I've got to tell you, I've no names, but I've counselled women who 23 years ago had an abortion and they still remember the child's would-be birthday. Seriously, it has a major effect on them. Wow. And that's not talked about because it goes against it. Everybody's worried about women losing their rights. You can still have that honest conversation with people considering an abortion. You can still have the honest conversation without touching the laws. But it would be better for someone to make an informed decision of the true cost than to just say, go down, don't worry, Medicare covers it. Medicare might cover the finance, but the rest of it nobody touches, nobody will help. And so before anyone can consider an abortion, go and get educated, go and speak to some women who've had an abortion. Not in the last 12 months.
That's a very good point.
20 years ago, go and get informed because we make these short-term decisions thinking it's going to be over as soon as on Thursday I get my abortion, it's all over. No, it's not. Your nightmare's about to begin on Thursday. It's a whole new problem.
Right. Okay, that's a very good point to have. To speak to women who have had abortions, who've gone through these experiences.
Get informed and not
a real
just,
life experience.
Exactly, and not just from the people that are going to continue to support the idea that you've got the right to terminate. And you might legally have the right, but you're not considering in full the moral implications.
Yeah, okay.
You will hurt yourself. There's no question you will hurt yourself.
Right. Well, look, Phil, I mean, we've sat here as two grown adults. And we've had this conversation. And again, we'll never really know what it feels like to be a woman, to have a child, to go through that experience. But to the women out there, like we're here to support you in every way or shape or form, whatever you're going through. And we're not enemies to you in any way or shape or form. We're actually trying to understand what's going on and trying to be supportive as possible. Yeah. And people like Phil who have the word of God come down, and people like me who have the platform to share the story of Phil and myself. Thank you so much. Do like and subscribe and drop a comment of what you guys think, whether it should be morally right or wrong. Thank you so much.